us may need it. The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. I had borne the 1,000 injuries of Fortunato as best I could, but when he ventured into insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my good will. I continued, as was my wont, to smile, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared, he prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and precious stones, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was an expert. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk, one evening during the supreme madness of carnival, of the carnival season, that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, and he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped costume, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was as pleased to see him, and that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. I have received a cask of what passes for Amontillado, but I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? An entire cask? Impossible. And in the middle of carnival season?" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado?" he said. "I have my doubts," I replied. "Amontillado," he replied. "Since you were otherwise occupied and are now, I am on my way to Lucchese. If anyone has a trustworthy taste, it is he. He will tell me, Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry," he said. "And yet some fools have it that his taste is a match for your own. Come, let us go," he said peremptorily. "Whither?" I asked. "To your vaults," he replied. "My friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement." "Lucchese?" "I have no engagement," he said. "Come." "My friend, no. It is not the engagement, but the severe head cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with the white dust of potassium nitrate." "Let us go nevertheless. My cold is merely nothing. Amontillado. You have been cheated. And as for Lucchese, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado." Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm. I put on a face mask of black silk and drew a black cloak closely about my person, and I suffered him to hurry me towards my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry at carnival as soon as my back was turned. I took 2 torches from the wall, and giving one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led down into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresor family. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells on his cap jingled as he strode. "The cask?" said he. "Oh, it's further on," said I. "But observe the white webwork which gleams from the cavern walls." He turned toward me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that showed he was intoxicated. "Nitrate," he said. "Nitrate," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" I asked. He coughed. My poor friend found it impossible to reply for a few minutes. It's nothing," he said. "Come, we'll go back," I said, with decision. "Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it's no matter. We'll go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchese." "Lucchese, enough," he said. "The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." True, I replied. "And indeed I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this red wine from Medoc will defend us from the damp." I drew a bottle from the long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded at me familiarly, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried souls that repose around us." "And I to your long life," I said. He again took my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive. The Montresors," I replied, "are a great and numerous family." "I forget your coat of arms," he said. A huge human foot of gold on an azure field. The foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel. "Oh, indeed," he said. "And the motto?" "Neme me impune lacassit." No one provokes me with impunity. "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes, and the bells jingled. My own face grew warm with the wine. We had passed through archways of piled bones, with casks and pillars intermingling, into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. "The nitrate," I said. "See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the walls. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle down among the bones. Come, but we must go back before it is too late. Your cough." "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on. But first, another draught of wine," he asked. I handed him a flagon of red wine. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and lifted the bottle upward with a gesture I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. You do not comprehend," he said. "Not I replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood." "How?" "You are not of the Masons." "Oh, yes, I said, yes. You impossible, he said. A mason? A mason, I replied. Show me a sign, he challenged. It is this, I answered, producing a trowel from underneath the folds of my cloth. You jest, he said. He exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. But let us proceed to the Amontillado. Be it so, I said, replacing the tool beneath my cloak, and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descending and then descending it again, until we arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our torches to flicker rather than to flame. At the most remote end of the crypt, there appeared an even smaller crypt. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead, in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. Three sides of this interior crypt were self-ornamented in the manner. From the fourth, the bones had been torn down and laid promiscuously upon the earth, forming a mound of some size. Within the wall thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived an interior recess in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It was in vain that Fortunato, lifting up his bell torch, endeavored to see into the depth of the recess. Proceed, I said. Herein is the Amontillado. As for Luke Casey, he is an ignoramus, he said, interrupting, right? As he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the deepest wall of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock wall, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him onto the granite. In the surface were 2 small staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these hung a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was much too astonished to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back out of the recess. Rub your hand over the wall, I said. You cannot help but feel the nitrate. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return. No? Then I must positively leave you. The Amontillado, yelled my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. True, I replied, the Amontillado. As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of the masonry when I discovered that Fortunato's drunkenness had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier and the third and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, so that I might hearken to it with the more satisfaction, I eased my labors and sat down on the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel and finished without interruption the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th tier. The wall was now nearly at level with my breast. I again paused, and holding a torch over the masonwork, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams burst suddenly from the throat of the chained man. They seemed to thrust me back violently. For a moment I hesitated. Then I reapproached the wall. He yelled. I echoed his yell. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this until the chained man grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier of the masonry. I had finished a portion of the 11th and last. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came from within the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, a very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo, over the wine. The Amontillado, I said. Yes, he said, yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will they not be awaiting us at the palazzo, the Lady Fortunato, and the rest? Let us be gone. Yes, I said, let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor. Yes, I said, for the love of God. But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, Fortunato. He had no answer. I called again, Fortunato. No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in reply only a tinkling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end to my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half of a century since that night, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat. Edgar Allan Poe, 1846.